What was your first impression of this report?
I mean, look, the 4Q results were in line with what we expected. We expected a slight upside to the client segment as customers are expected to draw down higher inventory for Intel, especially the new generation, which have higher ASPs. So that's where you see a shift mix towards that in 4Q. But the 1Q guidance miss, that large of a miss, we expected slight miss, but that was surprising to us. And to me, that suggests at this point that the typical PC seasonality and server seasonality in 1Q is going to be worse. And also there's headwinds from auto, industrial, enterprise, and networking, which it doesn't seem like their data center and PC ramp is going to offset.
Yeah, and that's something that we had heard from Texas Instruments as well. Kunjan, help us put this into perspective. For those who are not knee-deep in the intricacies of the semiconductor industry, what does it mean when TSMC gives a fairly optimistic outlook, and then you have Texas Instruments and Intel unable to follow up with that?
I mean, look, both of these companies are the majority shareholder in their space, so they're sort of a bellwether. So they do get impacted a lot by the macro. Now, what it means is, like, look, for Intel specifically, the first quarter, second quarter is typically not a seasonally strong PC quarter, right? And all this hype around AI PCs, we think, is going to start showing up barely beginning second half of 24. So the first half of 24 is going to be weak, and they have to suffer through that before the second half of 24 you start seeing server come back, their new server chips ramp, et cetera.
This gets to a broader question here about what's going on in the industry overall and what's specific to Intel and some of the other companies here, because as Scarlett alluded to, when you hear, let's throw ASML in there as well, a lot of people saw that forecast and that outlook for that company, and they say, okay, well, this must mean that the customers, i.e. the Intels of the world, are somehow ramping up their own production in anticipation of something big. Not necessarily seeing that in this report. Maybe the conference call gives us a little bit more clarity on that.
Yes, and there's a timing play here, right? Like when we look at those forecasts, they're talking about more of 2024 year, which most industry experts believe 2024 to be a growing sector for semiconductors. But right now we are talking about more of a near-term, one-quarter timing versus the year timing. So there's timing at play. We again think as we get into second half 24, you'll start to see the sort of earnings reports and guidance align with what TSMC and ASML have said.
I want to ask you about cost cuts. Intel says it expects to unlock further efficiencies in 2024. Which part of the business is going to bear the brunt of that?
I think the non-core businesses, which are not growing, would typically see the brunt of that. So definitely not the AI PC, not the sort of server business, but more sort of towards the industrial, networking business and the PSG side of the business.